I know you've heard of 40 acres and a mule, which was the promise that was made to former slaves in the USA. Now, this promise was the first systematic attempt to provide reparations to Black people living under slavery, but the order was overturned in 1865 and it forced people to give back land in Georgia, South Carolina, and on the Florida coastline to planters who had originally owned it. But now, in 2020, it seems that we are turning things around. 19 families and friends raised money and banded together to buy just under 97 acres of land in Toomsboro, Georgia, because they wanted to establish a self-sustaining Black community where they would feel safe. What I wanted to know is, do you think that this is something that we could do in the United Kingdom, or would it just further divide communities? And do you think it's possible to kind of rework or work within a broken system, or to fix a broken system, or do we really need to ditch it and start from scratch?
Firstly, I just want to say, last week we talked about Black history and the erasure of necessary Black history and how we need it to be in school curriculums. And not only that, but we need it to be common knowledge for everyone, not just the Black community. And so looking at the whole 40 acres and a mule thing and how what the families are doing now in 2020, in the 19th century, like in the 1800s, there were towns, like Black-owned towns for Black people, by Black people. And this is the kind of thing that is not common knowledge. This is just like a snippet of the type of history that we should all know. And before this, I'd heard of Black Wall Street, but I didn't know any details about it. And of course, it was nothing that I learned in school. It was just information that I happened upon in my later years. So that's just a side note. In terms of whether we should try and fix the system or ditch and start a new one, I say either or both. Do either or do both. I don't mind. I would just actually add that the system is not broken. It's working exactly the way that it was designed to work. It just was never designed to work for us. So if there's anyone who feels guilt about, trying to leave to start something new, please know that you owe nothing to a system that was designed to disservice you. You owe absolutely nothing.
I think the key thing to add on to the idea of that they were Black-owned towns, I mean, I would probably dispute not whether we need to know about it, but I guess being in Britain, it's not really our history the way that it is America's. And I think that reading about those Black-owned towns, and I think the one it was in Tulsa, Black Wall Street, which is being heavily featured on TV programs at the moment, which I think is really great. So Lovecraft Country, it was also featured on Watchmen, limited series, and they're really bringing this idea and talking about what happened in Tulsa, because it was a travesty. The town was burnt to the ground, basically. 300 people were killed.
Murdered,
were killed. So it is something important to know, but I guess for me, I'm just very in two minds about learning about American history as if it's our history, and then it doesn't really have us look at our own Black British history, which is very prevalent here. But the point that I'm making is that those Black-owned towns or those Black cities served a specific purpose because there was still segregation. So even with Black Wall Street, something that I didn't know was that when it was burnt down, it was actually rebuilt, which I didn't know about. And with it being rebuilt, they said it really ceased to exist and decline when segregation ended after the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, because they were formed a specific purpose. So I really wonder at them this collective trying to recreate that, and whether that's really the way forwards. Now, they're not saying that they want to be exclusively Black. I want to make that very clear. They're saying that it's going to be predominantly, and they're going to really focus on having Black law enforcement, Black police officers, Black political systems, but all are welcome. But I don't know about creating a town, because I just wonder if that's segregation again. That's the kind of question that I have. But I want to hear what you guys think about that.
Can see Luanda itching to say something. Go on.
Yeah.
Go on. And then
I just wanted to firstly clarify that when I said the thing about the Black Wall Street, like I specifically said, this is a snippet. Like a snippet of the real history that we should have been taught. Because like we said last week, there's so many things that have happened, like the first university being in Africa, the libraries, the medicines, the things that we've created, like all of these things are things that have been specifically erased, so that we're continuously taught a history that makes us feel powerless and makes us feel subvert. I don't know what word I'm trying to reach for there. But
inferior.
Inferior. Well, let's substitute it for inferior, because we act as if all of the things that we don't have are from lack of, ability or something, but it's actually a lack of resources, because we've had the ability and we've tried to do these things for ourselves when that town was created in terms of Tulsa. And like you said, then there was a massacre, like you massacred the town because you're not comfortable with the idea of us having a safe haven. And so I wouldn't call what's happening now in Georgia, correct? It's in Georgia, right? I wouldn't call what's happening in Georgia segregation. It is actually just a safe haven. There is not really any place on this earth that a Black person can go and not experience anti-Blackness. And so the idea of us, oh no, we're making the problem worse by being together. No, like where can we go and feel safe? Where? Like name a place on this earth that we can actually go and feel safe.
I'm going to come in on that one. And I think that's what is and for me, I'm not saying it is segregation. I'm just saying it, like if we're saying we're going to go off and be by ourselves to a certain extent and kind of create our own city and town, I just wonder about how that works for eradicating a problem that we can only eradicate together. I don't even know if it's possible for us to eradicate in our lifetime. I don't think it is, because these walls of systematic racism are big and they are deep rooted over centuries. But I think living away from other people, from other races, I don't know if that's what I thought. And I think what you were saying in terms of anti-Blackness and where can we go, there are places where there's plenty Black people and they're the people who are living there and they're in power and it's predominantly them in the country. Like,
it's not
the content. But I'm saying, if you're saying that, where can we go in the Western world? Yes. But I don't think we can say that there are places that where it's predominantly anti-Blackness as we would have here. Like it's obviously going to be seen in other places, but there are other places where it's just normal to be Black and it's not frowned upon. And I've been to those places and it is a completely different experience. It really is. But I think we need to be careful in saying in the Western world for sure, but that's not everywhere in the world where you feel like an outcast or different because of your physical appearance.
Okay, that's a little bit kind of different to what I was saying, because there's a difference between like being in a place where there's lots of Black people and being in the place where there's no anti-Blackness. You can be in many countries where everyone's Black, including the police officers and the president. It doesn't mean that there's no anti-Blackness in there. Like you creating something from scratch. The woman said, we don't intend it to be exclusively Black, but we absolutely intend it to be pro-Black. What nation on this planet Earth has been created with the intention for it to be pro-Black? And I'm not talking about the amount of Black people in the room. I'm talking about every system, every country, every government has been colonized to an extent where there's anti-Blackness in every single community, including our own Black communities. So I don't say I need to walk down the streets and just see loads of brothers and sisters. That's fine with me. I can go to areas in my hometown right now and do that. I'm talking about a mindset and I'm talking about a systematic change. And that doesn't exist right now. So for us to kind of look at people who are trying to create it and say that we're not really fixing the problem, how are we not? How are we not fixing the problem? Because we've looked at societies and cities and towns that are completely white already, and we're not saying, oh, you guys are doing segregation because you're completely white. They're just completely white. And that's why I said do either or do both. Like if you want to try and create a new system within the one that we already exist in, I believe in that. That's fine. And like you said, it might not be something that we see in our lifetime. But if you also want to have your own land and start something from scratch, and this is why I always, whenever we talk about issues, I always come from the opinion of tearing it down and starting again. Like, how many times are we going to try and work with something that's broken before we start something new? And that's why I talk about abolishing the police. And that's why I'm like, yeah, you want to create the Freedom Georgia Initiative? Go and do that. Go and have a safe haven where we've actually created it to be safe for us and not just happened upon a place where there's lots of black people, created something to be safe for black people. That's the difference.
I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this in certain areas, because I honestly think some of the things that you're saying, I disagree. Marisha, what do you think? Because you're our guest speaker. What do you think? Weigh in on this one.
Oh, how I feel so privileged. I'm probably somewhere a little bit between the two. So I think coming back to what Sophie said about not confusing, but looking at the American perspective on Black history and Black experience is different from the UK experience. There's obviously overlap, there's obviously similarities. I remember being very, very vividly being on holiday in Florida, and we went to stay with some friends, and it wasn't even late at night, it was just dark, so I don't know, it was like 9 o'clock at night. I have a younger brother, and he and my friend that we were staying with were just racing each other up and down the street, right? They're just playing. In the middle of one of the races, my brother's shoe came off, his trainer came off. And he finished the race and he got to the end of the street, and then a car turned around the corner, right? And my brother, he was so young, I don't know, maybe 7, maybe 8. So in his youth and his naivety and his unawareness of the world, saw this car around the corner, thought, oh no, like this car's gonna come and drive over my brand new Nikes trainers, and started running back down the street to get it. And my friend and his next door neighbor, so the friend is black, next door neighbor was Indian, started screaming at him, going, stop running, because you see black boy running down the street at night by himself in a residential neighborhood. Something's going to happen to you. They're going to ask questions later. And that was really my first experience of how nothing happened. It was actually a police car. It was actually a policeman lives on their block. So he kind of knew me. So Dan is like, what are you guys doing? Had a chat with them. But obviously knowing what I know now, and obviously growing up a little bit and losing some of that naivety, you can see how something so innocent could turn so quickly. So I do think if I try to imagine that scene happening here, even in the present day where things are heightened much more from a tension perspective, I wouldn't feel that same kind of alarm in my chest, like, oh God, this might end really badly if you're just running up and down the street late at night. Like it isn't, I guess our police don't routinely carry guns. It's a little bit less risky. So I think that's the first thing. We are looking at very, very different, like you literally just can't walk down the street minding your business and feel safe. And that everyone has a right to feel safe. I think it exists to a certain extent. That's not orchestrated in the way that the Freedom Georgia initiative is. So even if you take London as a whole, or like Greater London, which where I live, where I'm based, when you have immigrants or first generation, second generation, etc., people tend to gravitate towards familiarity and building communities. So if you look at the whole of London, or actually lots of parts of the UK, and there are very distinct areas and very distinct pockets where you will find a large population of the Afro-Caribbean community, a large population of the Indian people, and people feel safer and they feel more comfortable in that. And I think that's a natural tendency to gravitate towards things that are a shared and familiar experience. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that we need to police that, or that needs to stop. And I think that offers a degree of sanctuary and safety. I think in the UK, though, doing something like the Freedom Georgia thing and deliberately going, you could absolutely do it, but deliberately buying up land and trying to kind of, I guess, enforce like community rules and community projects and stuff like that. I think I'm kind of with Sophie that I think that it might actually breed a bigger problem. So I don't, yes, the system is broken. The system was never designed to fit us. But do I think that further segregating, whatever word you want to use, that's how it's going to work. I don't think so. And I think the reason I think back to that, and I like very simple examples. So they talked about having like schools and stuff in this thing. And yes, absolutely, we need to have a better representation of Black history in the school curriculum. But I went to a non-denominational school, people from lots of different cultures. All my school friends are from all over the place. And I learned so much by being in that environment. And I learned a lot, but they learned a lot as well. And I think that's where a lot of our open-mindedness and our tolerance and a bigger worldview comes from. I feel like if we start having these very closed communities, yes, it solves one problem of us not necessarily previously being allowed to celebrate our history and talk about our achievements and talk about the positive experiences that we have. But it stops us from sharing it with other people that perhaps also need to hear it to breed a bigger degree of tolerance and a bigger degree of community in a wider sense. And so I think that would be my worry about kind of segregating stuff, and especially from like such a young age when things can get ingrained. If all you only ever see, like I remember going to across the road from our house where I grew up as a Jewish family, and I used to play with their daughter. She was the same age as me. And then one day her mum said, "Do you want to stay for tea?" And we stayed for tea, and she had a younger sister. And the little sister literally halfway through tea went, "Why is your skin black?" And I remember seeing the mother literally like spat out her tea, was like, "Oh my God, mother, shut up." Like, "Oh my God, I'm mortified. I'm going to send this kid back across the road and she's going to never send my daughter here to play again." But that's because she, you know, they were a lovely Jewish family. The parts of the neighborhood had a lot of a big Jewish community. She spent a lot of time going to a Jewish nursery, a Jewish school, going to synagogue at the weekends. She just didn't really see anything outside of that and didn't understand it. And then there's no one around her on a day-to-day basis that she can ask about these curiosities. So if a Black girl comes to tea, then she's gonna be like, "Hey, I've been saving up my questions. I've been watching you from the window. Like, how come your skin is different to mine? Like, what's going on here?" But that was like a really lovely moment, and I gave like a very sort of basic answer, which was just, "Well, you've seen my mum and dad, and you've seen, you know, that my mum is Indian, my dad is Jamaican." And I said, "And you've seen your mum and dad." I said, "So you get that from your mum and dad," and we just left it at that. But I just think the segregation of stuff will stop opportunities like that, because then there's no need for you to go outside of the community, and that would be my worry about introducing it in the UK. I think it might solve part of a problem, but it breeds a bigger problem.
I mean, I think that there's so much more to be said on this topic, and maybe, as Luanda was saying, segregation isn't maybe the right word. I know I was saying that, but I understand it can bring up ideas of like apartheid or what went on in America. I was just trying to think of a word that meant, you know, separating yourself from. But I really think that what they're doing, putting your money behind your idea, as we talked about in the first issue that we talked about, is a powerful thing. But I guess I'm just wondering how it looks and how it breeds unity across all, because I think for me, that's the end goal of getting rid of racism. But like I said, we could talk about this a lot.